This is Beneath the Steeple from Trinity Lutheran Church in the heart of downtown Reading, Pennsylvania. This Pentecost, we celebrate the Spirit poured out on the church, and on Trinity Sunday, we mark 275 years of this congregation gathered under the name of the Triune God. Through the long green days of summer, we ask God to keep growing what the Spirit has begun in our worship, in our witness, and in our larger community. I'm Hans Becklin, Senior Pastor of Trinity, and we're honored to share God's word of grace with you today as you join us beneath the steeple. Jesus takes the 12 on a very long walk. 25 miles north, out of Galilee, out of their own country altogether, to a town called Caesarea Philippi. Now, Caesarea sat at the foot of Mount Hermon, where a spring comes straight out of the base of a limestone cliff. That cliff face is drilled full of niches. And in the niches, people had set statues, idols of the god Pan. At the bottom of the cliff, there is a cave where water comes up. And in the ancient world, many people believed that that very cave was the mouth of the underworld. It was a gate, the door that the dead would go in through. Out in front of the whole arrangement, Herod the Great raised a temple to Caesar Augustus. Added up, a rock face crowded with gods, a monument to what at that point had been the world's finest and most powerful sort of leader, and then a hole in the ground where death keeps its door. Standing in front of it all, Jesus turns to the disciples and asks, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" Now, here in this city, we know something about putting a monument high up on a rock face. 120 years ago, William Abbott Whitman quarried 10 acres out of the south end of Mount Penn, and then, to atone for the scar he had made, he built something magnificent and a bit whimsical on top of the mountain. And let's be frank, we love it even though it is a bit ridiculous. It's on all the signs you see as you enter Reading. It's even on Trinity's letterhead hanging out over our steeple. Now, I want to be clear, as far as I know, the pagoda is not an idol. No one in Berks County prays to it. But we human beings put things high up in visible places, on rocky faces, to announce who we are. We have been doing this for a very long time, and we are extremely good at it. That is the air the disciples are breathing when this weighty question lands. Their answers are good answers. They say that they've heard people calling Jesus John the Baptist, or Elijah, or Jeremiah, the second coming of one of Israel's great prophets. Nobody says he's a fraud. Nobody says he is a nobody. These are all reverent, generous guesses. The crowd reaches for the largest categories it knows, and it hands them over. But every single one of them is wrong. Not because the categories are too small, although they are, but because they are categories at all. Each one takes something we already had, something we already knew, and tries to fit Jesus inside it. Then Jesus narrows the question. He says, "Who do you say that I am?" In Greek, that you is plural. You all. He's not singling anyone out. He's asking the whole group of his followers at once, which means across the millennia, he is also asking us. Who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answers, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Let's give the man his due. He is the first one to say it out loud in this gospel, in Gentile territory, in front of Caesar's temple, where saying something like this out loud could really cost him something. Maybe even his life. No one else in that group of disciples opens his mouth. Peter does. And then in the very next breath, Jesus snatches the credit that Peter might be due away from him. He says, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven." There's no doubt that Peter's confession is the single greatest sentence that any disciple says in all the Gospels. And the moment it comes out of his mouth, Jesus tells him where it came from. "It didn't come from you, Peter." It's not a rebuke exactly. Jesus says, "Blessed are you." But that blessedness is the same sort of blessedness that a field has when it receives a summer rain. The field did not make the weather, it just receives it. Notice how he does not name himself either. The man we usually call Peter is Simon, son of Jonah. These are names handed to him, given to him like an inheritance. Names he had no say and no vote in. And in the same sentence in which he is given a job, he is given a new name. Rocky, or Peter. Identity and vocation arrive together from outside as a gift, like those summer rains. That is the truth about every one of us who has ever been given any task to do in the church. Not one of us thought this up. Not me, not the vestry, not even the young deaconess who walked through the doors of this parish in 1999. Jesus says, "I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." There's no getting around what that sentence has been made to carry throughout the centuries. Many have read it as if the church rests on one man, and after him on his successors, and that reading built an institution. Philip Melanchthon, Martin Luther's right-hand man, takes this up in a work called The Treatise on the Power and Primacy of the Pope, which our forebears signed at Smalcald in 1537. Melanchthon's answer to this long-held belief is short. He says that the rock is Peter's confession. It is what is being confessed, the content, not the one confessing it, the man. Christ is the foundation, and no one can lay another. No one need lay another. And frankly, we don't need the Lutheran confessions to prove this fact, because Matthew proves it just 6 verses later in the following pericope. Jesus begins to tell his disciples that he must suffer and be killed, and Peter, same man, same mouth, same afternoon, same place, takes him aside and rebukes him. He says, "Jesus, you can't talk this way." And Jesus says to this man, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me." The word in Greek is skandalon, a stone protuberant in the road. Inside of one paragraph, Simon Peter goes from being a rock to being a rock in the road. If the church were built on Simon Peter, it would have come down long before Good Friday, and then he would have been the one to take it down again in a courtyard 3 times in front of a servant girl. That brings us to the question of the keys. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. The keys are given here to St. Peter and will be given again in chapter 18 to the whole gathered assembly. That's why, if you remember your catechism, Luther puts the office of the keys as something that the church possesses, not something that a professional owns. The keys, which we use to forgive and to bind sins, belong to you, the people of God. The called and the rostered, we exercise them publicly on your behalf because you have called us to do it. Which means these keys to the kingdom of heaven, to bind and to loose, have never been in anyone's pocket. Not in St. Peter's pocket, not in my pocket, not in Deaconess Deborah's pocket. You heard this week that our dear deaconess is retiring. Retiring after 27 and a half years. 10 pastors, senior pastors, associate pastors, interim pastors. That's a lot of pastors. Some of us were here for a season, but she was here for all of them. There are adults in our congregation who learned the creed from her, who cannot remember a Trinity Lutheran that did not have her in it. So this morning, let us speak our fears out loud, because they are in this room whether we say them or not. We do not know what this place will be like without her. That is not a failure of faith. That is what gratitude looks like when it gets inflamed with fear. We don't grieve losing someone who does not matter to us. But here is the strange mercy. Deaconess Deborah has been sending us the answer to our question for years. At the bottom of almost every email, and most of us scrolled right past it. Sharing Christ's service. Almost every email that Deaconess Deborah writes ends that way. Sharing Christ's service, Deaconess Deborah. Notice what she says and doesn't say. She doesn't say, my service. She doesn't say, my ministry, generously loaned to us for a while and now being taken back in retirement. She says, Christ's service, a shared ministry. That, at the heart of it, is what the word deacon means, diakonia. A deacon does not manufacture the service and then distribute it like a little factory of good works. No, a deacon hands on to you something that was never hers to begin with. She has spent 27 and a half years quietly signing her name to the very thing Jesus says at Caesarea to his disciples. Flesh and blood did not reveal this. It was never mine. I am only passing on to you what I received from our Father in heaven. So hear, friends, what the promise is, and hear what it is not. The promise is not that sanctuary to our south, much more capacious and splendid than this room, beautiful as it is and beautiful as it will be. It's not 1751, nor is it the fact that we have outlasted a revolution, a civil war, and every economy that our country has managed to break. It's not even our wonderful endowment. Money is a fine servant of the work of God, but it makes for a ruinous foundation. It is not the rosters of names we love, and hard as this is to say, it is not her name. But she would be the first to tell you that. Look again at what Jesus promises in Caesarea. The gates of Hades, remember, that's where people thought they were standing. The gates of Hades will not prevail. Gates are defensive. Gates don't march out and attack somebody. Gates hold an opening closed. So the promise is not that we will be strong enough to hold out against death. No, the promise is that death's door, death's fortress, will not be able to remain closed against the massive and overwhelming power of Jesus Christ. He's not describing a fortress with us inside it. He is describing a rescue and the door being blown off its hinges. A retirement is a small ending. A real ending, yes. A painful one, yes. Worth every tear it costs, yes. And yet, compared to these eternal things, it is small. Jesus' promise to us was made against the largest ending that there is, the ending of death. His promise will carry this small ending without straining. The one thing left to do is the thing St. Peter did. Not to try to hold the church together. It was never ours to do. Simply to stand up in enemy territory, in Caesar's country, in a room that is sometimes not the one we expected, in a year when someone we love is leaving, and to say the confession out loud. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. In a few moments, when we stand up and make our own confession, it will not have been our own good idea to say those words. Flesh and blood will not have revealed them to us. No, it will be our Father in heaven, once again, still handing the words, the confession, the faith onto us. The way it was handed to St. Peter, the way it was handed to our sister Deborah, and the way it was handed and still is being handed to us. Amen.